Hi everyone, welcome to my video series on the ASA. The purpose of this video series is to introduce you guys to the ASA Firewall. I'll take you from the basics where you have no idea about what a firewall is, and by the end of it, you should be able to configure advanced features of the ASA Firewall like deep packet inspection, your high availability capabilities that the ASA has, all the way from active standby to active to the clustering capabilities of the ASA firewall. So my objective in this particular video is to introduce those topics. What are the different things that we'll be taking a look at, and what the ASA firewall is for people that have never seen it before. You'll get a chance to take a look at it from scratch. And as we build up through the video series, you'll get a chance to take a look at what are the advanced features of the ASA firewall. So with that in mind, let's get started with the overview of what the ASA firewall is all about and what are the capabilities it has right out of the box. So what the ASA firewall is, it's basically by default when you get it out of the box, it's nothing more than a secure router in the sense that it works like a router. It has the ability to run routing protocols like RIP, EIGRP, it runs OSPF, it runs BGP as well in the new version, the new code. Besides that, the difference between the ASA firewall versus your router is that the ASA firewall is optimized in terms of the hardware for security. So the ASICs are better programmed for security features, the connections that are made, the translation tables that are created, they're cached better. Not so much onto the routing side. Whereas on a router, you would have the hardware optimized for routing, forwarding traffic. The other capability of the ASA firewall would be that although the router, when you set up a router, all traffic is allowed through the router as long as you have full routing. On the ASA, there's certain things that do not work or do not flow through the ASA firewall by default. So it's a secure device, a secure router in one, if you want to take a look at it from one perspective. When you configure an interface on a normal router, you have two main functionalities that you assign to an interface. So let's say this is my interface on a router over here. Let's say this was a router. It has four interfaces: gig 0, gig 01, gig 02, and gig 03. On a normal router, when you configure it, you generally configure the router with an interface IP, the IP address, and you bring the interface up, which is the no shut command. That's what you do on a normal router. On the ASA firewall, besides these two capabilities, which is the IP address and the no shut command under the interface, on the firewall, you do those two basic capabilities. So when I want to initialize an interface on a firewall, you still need to give it an IP address and you need to bring the interface up. But besides that, in its default state, the firewall interface also requires two additional parameters. One of the parameters is the name of the interface, which is called the nameif command. This name of the interface is a name that will be used throughout the different commands on the ASA firewall. So when NAT or your routing is referring to an interface, they don't point to the physical interface like gig 0/0, they point to the name of the interface. So it's not an optional parameter, it is a required parameter where all the other commands that you have that go along with the ASA firewall, as I said, NATing, when you do firewalling later on, everything points to the name of the interface. Failover, sorry, not firewalling. Failover or the ACL. You apply the ACL. You don't apply the ACL to gig 0/0. You always apply it to the interface, which is referenced by the name rather than the interface, which is gig 0/0. The other parameter that is also required and very relevant over here is a parameter by the name of security level. All right. What is the security level over here? The security level governs the flow of traffic, the default flow of traffic. You have the levels are anywhere from a number, it's an arbitrary number between 0 to 100, where 0 is the least secure, and 100 is the most secure. Make sense? So when you assign an interface, an IP address, and a name if, along with that, you also are required to assign it a security level. That basically tells the firewall whether this traffic needs to be trusted or not trusted. So whenever you have a traffic flow, a packet that is going through the firewall, it's going to take a look at the source and destination interfaces and compare the security levels. By default, when traffic flows from an interface that has a lower security level, means it's coming from a least secure interface towards a more secure interface. When it's going from a lower security level towards a higher security level, this traffic by default is blocked. The firewall will not allow traffic to flow from a lower security level to a higher security level by default. So if you do want that traffic to be allowed, let's say you want traffic coming in from the internet towards the DMZ, where DMZ is a more secure interface. So let's say you have a DMZ with a security level of 50, you have your outside interface with a security level of 0. When traffic comes in from a 0 security level towards a higher security level, that traffic is by default dropped. Now, if you do want that to be done, we'll take a look at an ACL that allows you the ability to override or make an explicit exception to allow traffic coming in from 0 to or least secure interface to a more secure interface. But the default characteristic of a firewall is all dependent on the two interfaces that are in question, where the traffic is coming from and where the traffic is going to. And to allow the traffic by default, it's going to take a look at the security levels involved. If the traffic is coming from lower to higher, it's going to be blocked by default. What about the other way around? Let's say traffic was coming in from the inside interface and I've assigned inside my corporate network the highest security level, and my outside I've assigned it 0. So if traffic is coming from my inside interface going towards out, that traffic is allowed by default. So high to low, that traffic is allowed by default. Now, again, if you want to make an exception to that, you don't want certain traffic to go from inside to the outside, from high to low, you can always use an ACL to override the default behavior. But what I want you guys to understand over here is when you configure an interface on a firewall, besides giving it the normal IP address and no-shut commands, you also are required to give two more commands to an interface. What are the two additional commands that you need to give? Number one is your name of the interface, which is going to be used for all the other commands that come up later on in your configuration. They always point to the interface by using its name, not the physical interface. Like gig00 would not be used. It would be the interface name that would be used in the commands that follow. The other command that's required under the interface is your security level that governs the default flow of traffic through the firewall. All right. Now, my objective in this particular video is very basic, to have this topology that I have over here, where I have a firewall configured or connected to the outside interface. On the outside interface, this is my edge router connecting me to the internet. All right, and let me just make this go away. Let me do this over here so that I can show it to you a little better. Okay, the same thing is happening. Okay, at least I can see that. I'll do this. I'll open it up in Paint, which gives me a better chance of looking at the outside. This is what I want you guys to see over here. This is the same topology. This is my outside router. Think about this being my edge router. These are the interfaces that I have, or IP addresses or networks that I have access to on the outside. Simulating 10.2 to be like a local segment connected to R2, and these two to be IP addresses on the internet. All right. So I'm going to set the firewall up to communicate to R2 on the outside. I'll have two DMZ interfaces. What is a DMZ? Stands for demilitarized zone. It's a normal network. The reason it's called a demilitarized zone, it's basically the interface, the network that allows limited access from the outside to my corporate network. So any of my public servers that I have, which need to be accessed from the internet, I would put those public servers on my DMZ. Rather than putting the servers on my corporate network and those servers get compromised because I'm allowing access to it, and when they compromise my servers, they have horizontal access to other servers in my corporate network. What I do is I put them in a separate network, which is basically allowing me the ability to minimize my damage. If one of the servers does get compromised, it does not have access to my corporate network. It only has access to my public servers. And later on in the course, I'll also talk about private VLANs, which also allow you the ability to limit the damage even within the DMZ network, which is something that I would recommend that you deploy within your DMZ network. In my case, I have two DMZs over here, and there's a reason for that over here as well. When I do the labbing of the interfaces, I'll talk about it. Why do I have two DMZs over here? What's the purpose of that? But for right now, if you take a look at it, I have one interface on the inside, one interface on the outside. These four routers are surrounding the ASA are there to show you or simulate routing and also simulating devices on those segments. So this allows me the ability to check or see the configuration of these the firewall with communication with these routers for routing purposes, ping, telnet, those type of things. So with that in mind, let me go ahead and show you the config of the ASA firewall. My objective over here in this particular lab is very simple. This is my lab 1. My objective over here is to configure the interfaces on a blank ASA firewall. All right now, all I have done is I have 4 routers that are configured with IP addresses around the firewall, but the firewall itself is blank. Now, when I configure the interfaces, I want to do them based on this. I want my outside interface, which is facing the internet, to be called. So the interface on the, how should I say it, the external interface, the characteristic of that, I want to give it an IP address based on the diagram. If you take a look at it over here, the IP address is 192.1.20 is the network. .10 is my IP address with a /24 mask. So IP address on the external interface will be 192.1.20.10/24. I want to give it a name. The name I'm going to give it is the outside interface. Now, the other thing that I also want you guys to understand over here is when you have a blank interface, which is not initialized yet, and you give it a name, because it knows it needs to set a security level on it, and it sees there's no security level on the interface, by default, it'll set the name, the security level of the interface to 0 by default, except for a special name, and I'll talk about that next. But most of the interfaces that you have, when you set the name and it does not have a security level, the default security level that it sets it to is 0. And it does display a message telling you that it's done that. And then the no shut command is the other one that you would do. Then my internal interface. Internal interface is that interface that has a special name that would give it a non-zero security level. Let's set the IP address first. Based on the diagram, I'm going to give it an IP address of 10.11.11.10. You take a look at the diagram, you'll see that 10.11.11.10 gig 0/1, and then my name. Now this is where I told you that there's a special name on the firewall. When you assign it that name on a blank firewall interface, it automatically sets a security level to a non-zero level. Actually, it sets it to the highest possible level. But the name of the interface over here for that is inside. So if you give an interface a name of inside and there is no security level set on that interface, it automatically will set the security level to 100. You can change it, but by default, it'll set it to 100, and I'll display the message for you guys. I'll show you that as well. So I have my external interface as 192.1.20.10 and my internal interface of 10.11.11.10. The name of the interface on the outside is outside, or external interface is outside with a security level of 0, and the name of the internal interface is inside with a security level of 100. Another thing that I want to point out over here is the name of the interface is not case sensitive. Although it's not case sensitive, for the most part, there is a certain command that does point to it and it is case sensitive. For the most part, it is not case sensitive. So it will not be case sensitive. It doesn't matter whether you specify inside an uppercase or lowercase. As long as you say inside, it is going to set the security level to 100 on a blank interface. There is a certain command that does require the name of the interface to be case sensitive. We'll talk about that as we go through the series. But for right now, just remember, for the most part, the name of the interface is not case sensitive. All right. Although it is not case sensitive, I'll make it a little smaller so you guys can see it better. It does preserve the case. Means whatever name I gave to the interface at the time of the creation, when you go later on and you point to that interface, although you might use uppercase, lowercase to point to it, when you go back into your running config, it will have changed the name, the case back to the original case, which is what you have set at the time of creation of the interface. But you don't need to point it using the right case. I'll show you that as well as we go through it. What I mean by, although it is not case sensitive, it does preserve the case. All right. And these notes I'll also post up so you guys can take a look at the notes. That will also give you an idea of how to do the labs. You can follow along and do the labs as I do. Now I've set the external and the internal interface IP addresses and the configuration parameters. I'll do the same thing with the two DMZs that I have. I have a DMZ on one side, which is DMZ, let's say, for sales. All right. I want to call the DMZ for sales. I want to give it an IP address based again on the diagram as 192.168.3.10. That's what I want to assign it an IP address. The name, again, based on the diagram again, I want to give it a name of DMZ3. Now this one, I want to set the security level to 50. I want it to be higher than the external interface, so any traffic coming in from outside to inside is not given access by default. But at the same time, I want it to be less secure than the internal, so it cannot access the inside or the corporate network without explicit instructions or in policy for that. Similarly, I have, let's say, DMZ marketing, and that is on the left hand side. The IP address for that we'll say is 192.168.4.10. Name, we will call it DMZ4 based on the diagram again. And I also want to set the security level of this to 50. I'll explain what happens in terms of the flows between 50 to 50 in my next video when we talk about the traffic flows in detail. For right now, my main objective of this particular video is to get your interfaces up and running. All right. In the next video, I'll talk about the traffic flows. What do you need to do to allow traffic to flow through your firewall? So this is my requirement over here. How do I go about doing it on the ASA? This is initializing the ASA. So I'll go to my diagram and launch my devices. I have 4 routers and an ASA over here. These are the devices that I have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 routers and the ASA. Routers are configured based on the IP address of the diagram. So if you look at it, R1 has 2 loopbacks, 10.1.1.0, 10.10.10.0, and it has an Ethernet interface of 10.11.11.0. Let's check that out. Show IP interface brief. So the 2 loopbacks based on the diagram, 10.11.11.1 is the IP address of the interface. Router 2 again, which is the outside interface. The 3 loopbacks based on the diagram, 10.2.2.2, 199.1.1.1, 200.1.1.1, and the Ethernet interface of 20.2. All right. Router 3, that was the one on the DMZ. Same thing. Show IP interface brief. Has a 10.3 network loopback and 192.168.3.3 as my interface IP E00. Router 4 would be 192.168.4.4 with a loopback behind it as well. Let's check that out, and then we'll start configuring. Oops. 4. There you go. Those 2 interfaces over there. Now this ASA that I have over here is blank. It has nothing on it, just like a router. When you go into a router, and I'm assuming that you've done basic Cisco CCNA level type of certification or know what a router, the way a router works. So this is your basic configuration of an ASA. It has no config on it, just like a router boots up and it goes into the mode where it has the default host name as router and it's in the user exec mode. Same thing over here. This is the default host name of an ASA firewall, which is called Cisco ASA. All right. Just like you have a router greater than, this is Cisco 8 greater than. Now, what's the first thing that you do on a router when you come up so that you can start configuring it? You start with the en command. All right. Same thing over here. But the difference comes in the sense that this is a security device. Unlike a router where en will directly put you into privilege exec mode, here, when I type in en, it's going to prompt me for a password. So what's a default password for a Cisco ASA? Actually, this is just to fool the people that are trying to come in, because when you see a password, the human mind works, oh, there's a password, and says, okay, let me try Cisco as a password, let me try Cisco 123. But the actual reality is the default Cisco password on an ASA, or the default enabled password on a Cisco ASA is blank. So all you got to do at this point is press enter. But what people try to do is they think that this firewall has a password. So let me write this down as a note for you guys. So the default enable password on a Cisco ASA is blank. Not the word blank, blank as in nothing. All right. So once you type in enable, it'll ask you for the password. You type in enter, it puts you into the privilege exec mode, just like on a router. Just like on a router, over here, the next command would be config T to go into global config mode. And I'll ask you, would you like to enable anonymous error reporting to Cisco? I'll say no, I don't want that. It puts you into the global config mode. Just like on a router, router would say router config pound. Over here it says Cisco ASA pound. If I want to set the host name of the ASA, the command is host name. Let's say we call it ASA1. And it changes the prompt to ASA1. Just like on a normal router. Nothing different over here. So if you want to change the host name, changing the host name, again done just using the same type of command that you use on an iOS based router. Hostname ASA1, for example. Good so far? Now I can start configuring my interface so I can ping the other devices. As I told you, when you configure the interface over here, it needs to have 2 additional commands or parameters on the interface besides the IP address and no shut. I need to have the name if and the security level. So let's see how to configure that. But before that, let's check the interfaces that I have. To check the interfaces, to display the interfaces on the firewall, the command is show IP interface, so actually show interface IP brief. So it's a little different than your command on your router. On the router, the same command is show IP interface brief. Here, the command is show interface IP brief. That's the difference, slight difference that you have between a router and a firewall. So the command is a slight difference from the normal file command. The other thing that you'll notice is when I type in the command, I don't need to do the do command or exit out to do the show commands. Show interface IP brief gives you the same type of setup. I have 6 interfaces. Although I have 6, I'm only using 4 of them, 00 through 03. I actually have 7 plus the management interface. Management interface is an interface that you can keep on a separate network for that is dedicated for management. I'm not using that over here right now, although it's recommended in real life to set this interface for an out-of-band management. The out-of-band management basically means I'm not going to connect my normal data network to it. All I have is managers or administrators of the network that are connected to that segment. So in my case, I'm going to configure gig 0, gig 1, gig 2, and gig 3 as my 4 interfaces based on the diagram, this diagram over here. All right, so let's start configuring the first interface based on our requirements. My first interface is the outside, which has an IP address of 192.1.20.10. How do I start configuring it? Interface gig 0/0. Now, when I assign the IP address, normally on a router, I would say this. I can still do that on a firewall, but the luxury that you have on a firewall is that the firewall uses default masks as well. So for example, if this is the default mask for this class, this is a class C network. The class C network will have a default mask of 255, 255, 2550. So if that's the mask that I have, I do have the ability to omit that over here. If I wanted to, I can just type this command in without specifying the mask. It would automatically take the default mask for that particular class. It's a class C network, so it would automatically assign it a mask of 255, 255, 2550. Everybody okay with this? So if it was a class A network like 10.1.1.0, 10.2.2.0, the default mask would have been 255.0.0.0. This one has a default mask, so I can type this in. Once this is done, the name of the interface, again, I'm going to follow my requirement to the letter in the sense of what? My requirement for the external interface is outside with O capital. I'm going to follow it exactly like that. So I'll say name if outside. I'll show you the case preservation for that. Now, notice the message that popped in, the info security level of the outside interface is set to 0 by default. So any name except for the name of inside on a blank interface, if it's already configured, it won't change it. But because I had not configured the interface at all, it's a blank interface, it sets the security level to 0. So if you want to check the interface right now, you can do show run, or not do, just do show run interface gig 0/0, and you'll notice it puts the security level over here to 0. All right, and then the last thing is no shut to bring the interface up. Now if I do my show interface IP brief command again, you will notice that it has set an IP address of 20.10 and the interface is up. Now if you look at the diagram over here, I should be able to ping 192.1.20.2 this interface on R2. Let's try to do that and see if it works. So that tells me my communication on the outside interface is working properly. Now, let me put these commands for you over here now. Configuring the interfaces. Let's start with the first one, which is interface gig 0/0. I said IP address 192.20.10. Didn't put the mask, it automatically took the mask. Name if outside, which automatically set the security level for me to 0. But if I wanted to set the security level, this is the command for that. 0, and then the no shut command. Similarly, I want to configure my inside interface with 10.11.11.0/10, 10.11.11.10/24. But this is not the normal mask, not the default mask for a Class A network. So because of that, I need to set the mask manually. And the name of the interface is inside with I capital. I'll follow it exactly like that. So I'll go to gig 0/1. IP address, this one requires me to put the mask in because the mask for this particular network is not the default mask for a Class A. Enter. Should have set the security level as well. Didn't give me a message for that. Oh yeah, not at this point, not at the time of the IP address when I give it a name. Now, when I set the name over here to inside, you will notice it automatically will set the security level to 100. That's only with the name inside. So if it's a blank interface, no security level right now, and I do name if of inside, in any case, inside like this, inside like that, inside like that, it doesn't matter what inside you have. Any of those insides will put the security level to 100. That's the only name that gives it a non-level 0, what do you call it? Security level on a default or a blank interface. So let's check that out. So I'll say name if inside, and you will notice that the security level for this interface is set to 100. You can verify that two different ways. You can either do a show run interface gig 0/1. Tells you the security level is 100. I still do need to do the no shut. Or the other command that you can also use to check this out is the show name if command. Show name if command shows the name of the interface that you set, and you notice that O is being preserved as uppercase or I has been preserved as uppercase. So it does the case preservation. This is what I was talking about. The security level is 0 for outside and 100 for inside. And no shut. So the interface now should be up and running. So you have 192.1.20.10, 10.11.11.10. Now, if you go and look at your network over here, I should be able to ping the inside interface 10.11.11.1. Let's try it to make sure it is working. Again, as you guys can see, there's no requirement to do the do command. Actually, it doesn't work. You need to put the command in as is. Normally on a router, you either use the do command or you exit into the privilege exec to initiate a ping. I can do that directly from global config. So my second interface is also done. My third interface now in question over here is my DMZ interface. Let me put the commands in over here for you guys as well. So the IP address over here was 10.11.11.10, 255.255.255.0. Name if was inside I capital. Security level, although I did not need to set it, was set to 100 and no shut. Now the other interface is gig 02 based on the diagram, which is basically going to be my DMZ3 interface, the sales interface. All right, how do I set that up? Let's go ahead and take a look. And now it will, again, because it's a non-inside interface, it is also going to set the interface's security level to 0. But I want to change it. So gig 02, IP address based on the diagram. My IP address is 192.168.3.10/24. Class C with a Class C mask. Again, I don't need to put in the subnet mask. I can if I want to. It doesn't hurt, but you don't really need to. When I give it a name of DMZ3, based on what the diagram showed me the requirement was, it will set the security level to 0. Why 0? Any non-inside interface will set the security level to 0 on a blank interface. So that's what it's set to. But I want it to be something different. If you take a look at your requirement, I want it to be 50. So now I'll go in and set the security level to 50. Bring the interface up. Let's take a look at it. You'll see my third interface up at this point. All right, everybody okay with this? Now I should be able to ping 192.168.3.3, which is the router on this segment. So that's working as well. Let me write this command for you guys over here as well, so you guys can have this in here as well. IP address is 192.168.3.10. I didn't really need to do this, so I'll leave it off in your notes. DMZ3 was the name, and my security level was 50. Bring the interface up. Now similarly, I'm going to do my other interface now that you guys are comfortable with it. So I'll say gig03 is 4.10 and it's called DMZ4. I want to set the same security level based on that requirement. Copy it, paste it. Again, set the security level to 0 by default, but I changed it. Now I can again ping 192.168.4.4 right there. Show interface IP brief. It's there. Show name if shows the security levels of the 4 interfaces that I have. So this is how you initialize an ASA. So besides the IP address, you also give it a security level. So to recap, what are the different things that you learned in this particular video? You saw how to initialize an ASA firewall from scratch. You learned that by default traffic from lower security level to higher is blocked. So that's the significance of the security level, the default behavior of flow of traffic on a firewall. You also found out that traffic from high to low is allowed by default. So let me write these things down. You learn how to configure a firewall interface with the 4 parameters. What are the 4 parameters that I need to, 4 commands that you need to set up? You need to set the IP address. You will need to set the name of the interface. You will need to set the security level of the interface. And you need to bring the interface up, which is the no shutdown command. All right. Once you do that, you also saw some show commands. Show commands like what? You saw the first show command was show run interface, displays the running config for an interface. We did that. The other show command that I showed you was show interface IP brief. This is equivalent to the show IP interface brief command. All right. Then we saw the show name if command, displays the interfaces, their names, and their security levels. This is what you've learned in this particular video.